Arm yourself for life. A challenge for all of us. Robert Byrnes. The only thing that speaks the truth is the eloquences of passing time. The spoken word is a jacket tied too tight. Composer Frank Orell. Preface. The inspiration for this book may be surprising. It's from an argument where the theory of perception was used as a defense. Well, that is your perception. Upon hearing this, I quickly objected and stated, that's not true. A quicker reply was returned, please explain. I was taken aback and realized it was not simply explained. Before giving a response, I needed to lay a foundation. The answer was too complex for such an exchange. So I quickly excused myself and sat down at a computer and started writing an outline, listing the items I wished to raise in support of my argument. In doing so, realizing that the list was becoming a bit lengthy and somewhat fascinating, I completed it and put it aside for a few days. Upon my return, I realized it represented a philosophy for living that I have adhered to my entire life, a philosophy contrary to popular culture but consistent with science, psychology and religion, a holistic approach. That is when I decided to fill in and expand outline. I felt I had something special and worth saying while realizing I am not a writer and it would be a challenge to carry such a complex subject to its conclusion. This text is a result of that outline. The book is divided into 3 sections, with the first being a discussion regarding influences. It is my hope to assist people in better managing the variety of good and bad influences bombarding people on a minute-by-minute basis. The idea is one is happier through taking control of influences. There are just too many people, groups, businesses and institutions gaming for support. My message is that each person is in control of his or her influences, unlike what many influence promoters would want us to think. The second section is about the universe and our place in it. Here the book talks about perceptions, reality, personal choice and the Big Bang. Choice has a major role in our relationship with the universe and the people around us. It is all about choices. The goal of these chapters is to assist readers in gaining a sense of purpose and belong. A large part of the book is dedicated to the subject of choice. In college, I had a very bright and somewhat geeky math professor who wrote very simple instructions on his tests. Make your answers deliberate, if there is an answer. I believe his concise and somewhat vague instruction applies to one's choices in life. No bones about it, making choices is the most important thing we do as human beings. The last set of chapters is all about opportunity, the opportunity to expand horizons through understanding and removing the obstacles that inhibit our growth as human beings. The goal here is to expand people's vision and to assist them in attaining the courage to take the next step in their lives. It is easy to say we can all do better and understand more. These chapters set a roadmap for doing just that. Contents. I Taking Control 1. E. A New Awareness 20. 3. How Everything Fits Together 45. IV. Expand Our Horizons 83. Figure 1 Behavior Scale 32. Figure 2 Dimensions of Behavior 33. Figure 3 Maslow's Hierarchy of Needs 44. Figure 4 Object-Oriented Process 54. Figure 5 Human Race Object Group 57. Figure 6 The Fabric of Time 61. Figure 7 Decision Tree 70. Figure 8 Tic-Tac-Toe Grid 71. Figure 9 Tic-Tac-Toe Game 71. Figure 10 Tic-Tac-Toe Strategy 72. Figure 11 Pros and Cons Forces 77. Figure 12 Personal Atmospheres 99. I Taking Control. 1. Introduction. Our premise is simple: to help better identifying and handle the challenges in one's life so that she can be happier and live life in greater peace. To assist in better understanding of feelings, emotions, and the world around us, to better recognize both the internal and external forces preventing us from being a happy and a peace-filled person. In a nutshell, the principle set forth here is to help arm yourself against bad influence while embracing what is good in this world. In many ways, this book provides a technique of re-educating people on how to live a good life without superficial and negative influences. This may be a long process for some, as society has strayed so far from the truth, making it difficult to learn the road back. To be successful, one must accept being totally re-educated, little by little. The problem with humankind is not so much that people have bad intentions. There are plenty of good-hearted people, but that as a society we have not realized that we under a spell. We placidly accept so many negative things as truth that may not be true at all, in the media, from friends and from people in authority. Consequently, we have an unrealistic view of right and wrong. Many of us have become the image of negativity without even realizing it. It is my belief, we are a happier and more peace-filled people through better understanding of the multifaceted forces working around us. Our hearts and minds are filled with competing feelings, emotions and thoughts. Any combination of these basic human elements can assist in living fuller, peaceful, and happier lives or literally drive us crazy. Every moment of every day, we receive thousands of messages through our thoughts, feelings and other sensory perceptions. These messages influence every decision and action. As an individual, it's one's mission to interpret these messages and to make the right choices for the people we care about and ourselves. Modern psychology has spent decades observing, analyzing, theorizing and diagnosing the basic elements of the human experience. There are colleges dedicated to the educating and training of professionals and doctors in the science of understanding and treating acute cases of depression, obsessive behavior, hyperactiveness, etc. In our country there is an extensive network of service provides, special insurance coverage to treat every aspect of behavioral illnesses. In no way am I qualified to treat any illness, psychological or otherwise. In no way is the purpose of this book to assist people in improving their lives through diagnoses, treatments or following a series of steps. Its purpose is simply to help arm people with information, understanding and awareness, to arm one against the negativity in world. It is a preventive narrative to help people before they get overwhelmed, depressed and/or acutely ill. This not a book for ill people, but it is a book for common everyday folk. People who want to grow as individuals and take their life experiences to the next level or, as you will learn later, the next atmosphere. As a modern society, we focus on so many important academic, social and scientific endeavors, but nowhere are we developing basic skills of interpreting one's feelings, expanding one's understanding and most importantly one's awareness of how we choose. Somehow, these basic skills have been lost in this fast-paced world. They have been pushed aside for loftier undertakings. As a result, this lack of skill is at the root of most of our personal problems. It is at the center of our most basic confusion and interconflict. It causes many people to lose their identity and distance themselves from their families and friends. This lack of basic human skills creates an ever-expanding chasm that is difficult to cross. Here we can only hope to establish a foundation for bridging the gap between one's personal voids and pursuits of peace and happiness. Essentially, this book illustrates an unusual collection of concepts and theories widely available in the public domain and authoritative publications. The difference here is the holistic approach that ties them together with a focus on the individual. Personally, I have learned many of these concepts in college, others as part of my career in the computer technology field, business training, and others through my general pursuit of knowledge. It is my hope that exposure to these concepts will allow people to see the world in a new way, to view other people in a better light and most importantly to view oneself in a peaceful and an accepting way. One last thing to keep in mind while reading this book is, it is a speculative narrative, it offers no proofs. It highlights tools and a way of thinking that may help people with their own conclusions, other than as part of an example, it does not offer any of its own. So take some time and please read this book with an open mind. I can only hope that it will enrich your life as the writing of it has enriched mine. 2. It can't be about me. Let's get right to it. One of my motivators for this book is a keychain that read, "If it's not about me, it's not important." I thought, wow, what a train. I do understand it as tongue-in-cheek comment and meant as a joke. Nevertheless, it is out there, people are reading it, they are absorbing it and acknowledging it. It is truly a ticket to unhappiness for all who participate. The truth is it cannot be about you or me. It can never be about an individual. As humans, we lack the capacity to carry such burdens. The responsibilities and pressure of our lives are too great for our meager human brains to handle. The concept of, "it can't be about me," can be summed up with 3 questions. What if I make a mistake? What if I fail? Whose fault is it? These questions exemplify the challenging thoughts that people have every day. These kinds of thoughts hold us back. They take us away from pursuits of individual peace and happiness. Such question leads to anxiety and interconflict, which leads to self-doubt, resulting in obsessive behavior. It's the classic rat in a corner. I assure you, no cornered rat is happy. Say it any way you want, but human history clearly illustrates that we are social beings, pack animals, tribal dwellers, etc. We very much need each other. Yes, we are individuals, but individuals who are interconnected through actions and choices, living within the same space and time. What's a real shame is, since the mid-1960s, how our society has stressed the notation that it is all about me. Do you remember the Pepsi slogan, the me generation? Each generation since the baby boomers have become more isolated, self-centered and more lost in terms of their own self-worth and sense of belonging. As far as this book is concerned, it can't be about me, it has to be about us, is a metaphor for the transformation that occurs when one realizes that there are not 6.5 billion stories being played out in this world but one complex plan being revealed. Understanding our plan in that plan is better than having no plan at all. 3. Our hearts and minds. Before we start talking about feelings, thoughts and emotions, we'll take a moment to talk about our brains and our hearts. There is no doubt about it, both are critical to survival. It is easy to conclude that our brains are doing most of the work. After all, it operates our bodies. It commands our legs and arms to move, it stores our memories and houses both our emotional and logical processors. The more one learns about the brain, the more one realizes what is not known. Physiologically, the brain is a complex collection of neurological connectors. These connectors dictate our habits, direct influences, and helps process decisions. Scientists have divided the brain into sections, separately identifying sections that help speech, vision, hearing, movement, etc., but the principal mystery remains: how do these connectors work? What we do know is there are millions of connectors and receptors all over the brain. When a connector attaches to a receptor, the neurological connection is made. The interesting part is, if these connectors and receptors attach to each other often enough they become neurologically fused together. Thus far, scientific research has been focused on the connectors that dictate one's habits and tendencies. In fact, scientists have developed drugs that disrupt these connectors, thus interfering with their ultimate union. For example, drugs that help one quit smoking disrupt the part of our brain that creates the smoking habit neurological union, the section that creates the urges and cravings. With these drugs, many times, one still feels the urge or craving, but does not react, because the final connection is never made. What this all has to do with our goal of obtaining happiness and peace through understanding? Well, plenty. These neurological connectors facilitate either happiness or hopelessness. It is up to us to break bad connections and encourage good ones. These neurological unions are created through thoughts and actions. Think of them as a path well traveled. If one always travels the same path, it will become worn and easy to walk on. The least traveled path is difficult and unfamiliar. Only through use and over time will a path become easy to travel. It is up to all of us to travel the right path, not necessarily the easy one. When traveling the right path often, it will become easier. I am not going to lie to you, this is simple in theory, but difficult in practice. Changing paths is the toughest thing we can do in this world. All I can say is it is worth it. Now the heart is another story. We need to acknowledge the value of our hearts beyond its primary function of pumping blood through our bodies. After all, it increases our blood flow when we are excited and decreases it when we are at rest. If you think about it, the brain and heart have a symbiotic relationship, where the heart feeds the brain and the brain operates the heart. Maybe this is what ancient people realized when they concluded that the heart manages our emotions while the brain does our thinking. Personally, I prefer the ancient romantic notion of our brains and hearts to the scientific ones. It just is easier to visualize. Here we will treat the heart and mind as one unit, working together to receive, decode and absorb all the internal and external influences of the world. As mentioned earlier, our hearts and minds are filled with competing feelings, emotions and thoughts. In this discussion, let us call them messages that one receives, acknowledges, categories, and stores, messages that one uses to make choices and conduct their lives. As we are the receivers of messages, it makes sense that there must be a sender. It also makes sense that the person and/or thing that is sending the message has distinctly different motivations and reasons than the receiver has for expecting the message. Now imagine your mind as a shortwave radio antenna picking stations from all over the world, news programs, entertainment shows, political commentary, TV, movies, internet, etc. Imagine these radio stations broadcasting all at the same time, feeding your brain with so much information that it feels like it may explode. That is what we are up against, a flood of messages waiting to be interpreted and utilized as the foundation for how we live. To survive, we must arm ourselves against bad messages while embracing good ones. We must arm ourselves with understanding against falsehoods while embracing truths. 4. What we're up against. No need for an expert to tell us that there are more negative than positive influences in the modern world. Granted, there has always been wickedness, but over the past 150 years or so, it has noticeably increased its penetration into everyday life. How has this happened? Well, it occurred largely through advancements in communications. Some people say it started with the Gutenberg press, others say it was Horace Greeley tabloid newspaper. Recently, the internet holds most of the blame. Regardless of the media, the truth is people have a tendency to believe what they hear and read. As a society, we freely accept the spoken and written word as truth. History is filled with scoundrels manipulating publications to push their personal agenda forward or simply to gain power. American history tells us that the first scandalizing anonymous newspaper articles making unfair accusations about a politician was issued by Thomas Jefferson about Alexander Hamilton in 1792. However, what makes this time in history different from any other is that manipulation and scandalizing of the truth is the norm rather than the exception. I submit that we are on the verge of creating a new society, one based on the whims of the individual, on trends rather than substances, a society where a young person aspires to be famous above being righteous. I am not saying that newspapers, TV and other media are evil by nature. I will say that they are easily exploited. The media is what we have make it. The problem is when the modern mass media is exploited by bad people, their messages reach a larger and larger audience, thus creating the opportunity to influence more and more people. As the world grows smaller through technology, the spread of malice is increasing exponentially. This is illustrated best by Hollywood. When a starlet exposes herself, it is broadcasted to hundreds of millions of people, most of which do not want to see it. Why, may one ask, did 70 million people watch the O.J. trial in 1995? The simple answer is it was available. The fact is that the modern world presents so many astonishing images, statements and questions that we lack the capacity to interpret all them. It is truly overwhelming. 4.1 Influence and Power. Keeping in mind our theme of arming ourselves against the storm of negative influences bombarding our hearts and minds, let us spend a few moments to understand the source of some of these influential messages. It stands to reason that before we can interpret these messages, we need to understand their origins, or should I say their motivations. Influences are, most likely, the easiest messages to visualize. Every person who speaks is communicating an influential message. Every billboard, newspaper, TV reality show and even books are sending influential messages. These senders are either trying to sell something, convince one to agree with their point of view, or maybe they are just trying to make one feel good. Many people say that influence is power. That may be true, but here we hope to help turn the tables and regain power over our influences. In this chapter, we are highlighting some typical American societal influences, is not to judge, but to help better identify and interpret these influences. 4.2 Societal Influences. It is impossible to categorize every external and internal influential message received, but here is a sample of the overwhelming social influences we all feel. We may not realize it, but our society is truly one of extremes. As part of our case here, we will focus on three major social influences: Puritanism, Utopianism and capitalism. While reading this chapter, keep in mind the vastly different messages being received by everybody on a moment-by-moment basis rooted in a dichotomy of vastly diverse values and aspiration. In addition, keep in mind that at least one if not all of these influences may persuade your next decision. 4.2.1 Puritanism. American society was founded on a tradition of religious freedom, not just any religious freedom but Puritanism. That's right. The Puritans were here first, to bring their heritage to this land, and they set the groundwork for how we live today. Puritans sought to cleanse the culture of what they regarded as corrupt and sinful practices. They believed that the civil government should strictly enforce public morality by prohibiting vices such as drunkenness, gambling, profanity, and ostentatious dress. These days, we do not use the term Puritanism, we have adapted a new term, fundamentalism. Now take a minute and ponder the notion of how fundamentalism has shaped our country. In the 19th century, the fundamentalist reformers cleaned up the Wild West in many of our big cities. In the 20th century, legislation curbing organized crime, gambling and prostitution are accredited to these movements, not to mention the amendment for probations. They have been very successful in their endeavors. Their tool is influence through judgment and fear. Their method is to threaten in numbers. Still today, the moral majority holds great power and influence in government and social reform arenas. How does this affect us? Well, it embeds judgment and fear in our basic moral formation. Ask yourself if any time in your life, say during your childhood, somebody in authority accused you of being immoral or doing something sinful. At the time, you may have thought the accusation was unreasonable. Maybe it was or maybe it was not. That is not the point. The issue is how it affected you, how did it make you feel, and most importantly, how did it alter the way you conduct your life thereafter. At the very least, it planted a seed of fear and doubt in your mind about your own ability to make the right choices. Psychology experts tell us that we are not born with fear and doubt. It is something we learn. This fear of making a mistake or being judged by others has a name. We call it inhibition. Inhibition is what holds us back from being ourselves and ultimately from being peace-filled and happy. Everyone in authority has a choice to correct behavior by passing judgment or to nurture it and provide understanding. The Puritans taught us to judge first and understand later. It is that seed of doubt that drives us to increased inhibition and guilt. Granted, we cannot blame all bad judgment on just one group of early Euro-Americans, but we can show their influences in our news media, churches and advertisement. The real crime is not the practice of judging first and understanding second, it is how feelings of fear and doubt are exploited in society today. I am sure you can provide examples from today's news, how a politician accused another politician of an immoral act. How a criminal is being judged before she is tried in a court of law. The best example is the saying, he is being tried in the court of public opinion. When influence peddlers in the news media and elsewhere say such things, their purpose is to remind us of that dramatic moment when we first doubted our ability to choose. They raise fear in our heart and suggest that since we are a bad judge, we should let them choose for us. They are asking us to follow their lead. Leading through fear is the oldest trick in the book. History is full of tyrants who led through fear. 4.2.2 Utopianism. On the other hand, once societal influences did not stop with the Puritans, it slowly evolved into something very different. For many of the subsequent early settlers, America was an opportunity to start again. It was a place to create a new society, a utopian one. Some of the earliest Christian communities in New Jersey and New York proposed to realize heaven on earth. We have come to know it as the American dream. Early settlers realized utopia was possible after their first meetings with Native Americans. This land was everything Europe was not but wished it could be. These so-called savages were free of guile, deception, disingenuousness, and corruption. The American natives Indians knew not property, warfare, strife, deceit, or arbitrary authority would fire the imagination of philosophers such as Montaigne and Voltaire. The utopian fire still breathes strongly today. I am sure you will agree that the hope for government-sponsored paradise is pursued in all levels of popular culture. The pursuit of a personal utopia is most notable in Hollywood, where movies portray it on a regular basis. I could give many examples, but I rather quote the most famous utopian spokesperson of our time, John Lennon. Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if one try. No hell below us. Above us only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for. And no religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. One may say I'm a dreamer. But I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us. And the world will be as one. Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger. A brotherhood of man. Imagine all the people sharing all the world. You may say I'm a dreamer. But I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us. And the world will live as one. As John so elegantly said, the utopian movement is the other side of the spectrum from the fundamentalism one. Where Puritans wish to suppress and control, the utopians wish to throw away all worldly possessions, religion, and live for today. Their strategy is to challenge all existing institutions without regard. It is dumbfounding when one realizes how our culture is completely immersed in the utopian movement. It is in our politics. It is in our news. It is in our entertainment. After all, it is the foundation of our country. The United States of America was founded as heaven on earth. We are the grand utopian experiment. If we do not accept this, look at how the United States treats other countries, how our government treats its citizens and those who disagree. One may ask, how does this affect me? Well, the utopian message is, we are failing at your duty. If we are not actively trying to improve the world, we are less of a person. Utopian influence peddlers are putting the burden of the whole world squarely on our shoulders. This tactic is controlling people through intimidation. They are calling us to action by humbling us. My favorite saying is they are pulling on your heartstrings. Like the Puritan before them, there is nothing wrong with their ideas but only in their methods in forcing us to follow. 4.2.3 Capitalism. To continue the utopian discussion in terms of dollars and cents, we must consider capitalism. As many historians will tell one, the American Civil War was not about slavery, it was about two colliding lifestyles. Prior to the war, the southern states were living in a true European style. Complete with a caste system where the plantation owners were the nobles, the hill people were the peasants, and of course the Africans were the slaves. Before the war, the southern nobles lived in a complacent society of large plantations with important social events, rich in tradition and honor. On the other hand, the northern states' utopian desires grow into a culture where a slave could become a peasant could become a noble, and, in some cases, a noble could become a peasant. This culture did not have time for tradition and honor. It was a society built on hope, promise, ambition, and most of all, money. I need not remind you that the North won both the war and the societal conflict. This pursuit of the American dream has manifested itself into every aspect of the modern capitalistic society. For many people, capitalism is a kind of religion, money is essential for happiness, and well-being is a matter of faith. Capitalism is less of a societal utopia but an individual one, where a person can create his/her own utopia, one that is shielded and isolated from the world around them. This is a great burden for people, especially ones of little means. As capitalism is clearly part of the utopian movement, it is worthy of our focus as it is rooted in ambition and guile. If one thinks about it, money is a burden for both the haves and have-nots. If one has wealth, they must struggle to keep it and maybe grow wealthier. If one does not, they carry the burden of failure. The most ironic byproduct of capitalism is lordshipism. You see, once a person is wealth in a free society such as ours, his/her best chance of maintaining that wealth is through control, to take away freedoms. As more one controls, the more a person is empowered and considers themselves in a way similar to the feudal lord of old. The irony is that a person who gains success through freedom wishes to remove it from others. What a terrible burden! How unhappy these people must be. 4.3 It is up to us. It is up to us, to each individual, to make his or her own choices on which social influences to accept and which ones to reject. The media especially amplifies these influences beyond our capability to interpret them. 24 hours TV newscasts have especially increased incoming influential messages to 1 every 5 to 10 seconds. The TV news is an influence factory with an assembly line pumping influence. They are continuously bombarding our senses. It is a wonder we do not all go insane. I invite you to live your own American dream, one with free choice and balance of influence. One where negative influences are discounted and discarded, one without fear of chastisement and guilt. 4.4 A matter of opinion. Like societal influences, personal influences are very difficult to interpret. When hearing the personal opinion of a close friend or family member, there is usually a high level of trust. One may trust that they know what they are talking about, or they would not be stating it. There are also maybe a long track record of good opinions received from a person. Granted, there also may be a track record of bad ones. The fact is, at any given time a person, trusted or not, may give a good or bad opinion statement. One just never knows. The trick is to find out where the opinion originated. Was it a personal account, from the neighbor down the street, the newspaper, or the television? It is best to understand first the root source of opinions. Are they rooted in fact or truth? Only then can one make a choice to accept them or not, to accept their influences or not. Our only weapon against bad opinions and their influences is to ask many questions and be a good listener. When inquiring, try to focus on the opinion holder's general ability to interpret the influences they received. Avoid opinions rooted in fear, frustration, or hatred. It sounds obvious, but it may be harder than one thinks, to objectively collect such information. I recommend you accept opinion rooted in fact or truth. If the person's opinion comes from their education or personal life experience, then go ahead and accept it. In addition, if you are sure it comes from their interpretation of the truth, one should also accept it. Although dealing in truths is very tricky, there are many shady people in this world expressing opinions under the umbrella of truth. One must trust the person's interpretation of truth before trusting anything they say. For example, when attending a church, accept the general dogma, the legitimacy of the minister, and the creditability of the institution before accepting anything they say from the pulpit. It comes down to this. Ask, are the person's words and actions consistent with their values and traditions? Does it have a sound foundation, a legacy of truth? 4.5 The ever-changing relativism. The concept of truth is very difficult for us. As human beings, we hunger for immediate self-gratification. This causes many to reject the concept of truth, thus conveniently eliminating absolute and unchanging laws. This gives rise to relativism, which claims that truths, even basic ones, such as the worth and dignity of human life, changes with time and circumstance. Unfortunately, applying relativism to human behavior is currently causing much societal confusion, since it cancels any consistent ethical or moral standards. However, relativism unwittingly, rather stupidly, destroys its own credibility, by denying that anything it may say is definite or true. It is my hope that we all embrace basic truths, ones founded in tradition. The concept of relativism reminds me of the old saying, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. When it comes to opinion, just do not trust any at face value. Always challenge the foundation of the statement. If the opinion statement stands, after your inquiry and challenges, then go ahead and accept it as an influence in your life. After all, that is your choice every time somebody opens their mouth to speak. 4.6 The challenge before us. The reality is there are no black and white answers when interpreting influential message. Regardless of who is peddling the influences, every one of us has to choose what is right for us. Please spend time developing these skills, to quickly identify, accept or reject influences. Interpreting influences is truly the most difficult task before us as we move through our daily lives. It is also the most important, as interpreting influences dictates decisions and sets the direction for the future. The challenge before us is to interpret the many social and personal influences correctly. Look for the influences. Next time you watch a TV news story, filter out all the heart-wrenching and fearful influences and formulate your opinion based on the facts rather than the emotional tactics put forth by the presenter. Remember to be on the lookout for any person in authority who chooses to influence with guilt, fear, responsibly or guile. Those are burdens you do not wish to carry. Of course, we should all do the right thing for our families and ourselves, but for the right reasons and not as a result of external pressure. My advice is to look for the motivation behind the influence peddling. What is the presenter's goal? If it is rooted in a negativity, reject it, otherwise consider it. 4.7 Pendulum and the metronome. Try to be mindful of the aggregate influences, ones that affect us all. Societal influences seem to move like waves in the ocean, carrying us all on their aimless tides through the vastness. Sometimes we don't realize their existence, it just all makes sense to follow the leader. That's why identifying these influences is so critical. Make up your own mind. We are living in a time of influences gone wild. It's a new civil war, one of right versus left, red versus blue, fundamental versus radical. Societal influences should swing like a pendulum between opposing points of view. They should swing gently back and forth, avoiding extremes. As we become more conservative, we should trim our wings and turn back towards the liberal and vice versa. We should always be mindful of traveling too far one way or the other. Over the past 60 years or so, the pendulum has swung erratically. It swung much too far and much too fast for us to react, so now it's stuck, it stopped swinging. The two extremes are now fighting for its control like in a tug-of-war. Both sides wish to capture and dominate American society. It's a stalemate where nobody wins. This is not about the government, it is about society and competing influences, but the federal government is a reflection of American society as it represents us in our interconflicts. Personally, I try to remember that it is not good government who makes good people, but good people who make good government. Leadership is paramount. When we are lost, we look to the government to set a new direction. Today, we are lost and hoping for leadership in many critical areas of society. The government, especially the president, should be like a metronome, setting the pace and ensuring society does not swing too far. Keep it from the extremes and ensure it is still moving. Today's challenge is to jumpstart a stalled pendulum. Like a metronome, the government needs to set the rhythm and show us the way. That is my message to accept or reject. Arming yourself for life describes the ability to make the right choices without external pressures, including mine. To interpret influences as best one can. To choose without judgment, doubt, intimidation, ambition, guile or fear.